Pritchett of the Church of Mavis radio show. Starting in March, we'll be going to a new time slot of Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm very happy to be going to this earlier time slot. I'll be more peppier, so watch out for other truckers. So remember to tune in to me, Beelzebub, and Wham to get your paranormal groove on. Can you dig it? Bringing you original guests, not regurgitating guests. So tune in, drop in, and drop out. Be there or be at Dork Square. We'll see you on Friday nights. And yeah, this is a Sanford Son song. Well, that's how we get our groove on, baby.
If you are listening to the show and wish to join us in the chat room, visit paltalk.com. Go to the social issues, select Other, and enter the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Tune in to the Mind Cemetery with your hosts Chip and Nicole every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We delve into UFOs, abductions, ghosts, aliens, conspiracies, and cryptozoology.
And how could you ever forget about those creepy topics you won't hear on your local news?
This is where I would insert my obligatory skeptical statement. The Mind Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to us on Facebook. Also check us out on our website, mindcemetery.com, for show updates and the critically acclaimed Mind Cemetery blog.
It's not critically acclaimed, but you should check it out anyway, mindcemetery.com.
The UPRN family of shows would like to take a moment to thank our loyal listeners for tuning in to uprntalkradio.com along with 107.7 FM New Orleans. Broadcasting on multiple platforms like Live 365, Ustream, and Shoutcast has made the UPRN the longest-running, highly rated, and best source of quality, unique programming that is not afraid of the status quo in alternative media. This station has a solid course of shows and hosts that refuse to get stuck in a rut or be overrun by a groupthink mentality, because station owner, host, and iCar founder Joe Montaldo knows the value of letting his talented stable of hosts grow uninhibited. In this genre, that's an accomplishment which many in alternative radio are striving for, but are left consistently wanting. This is all made possible because of you, the listener, that tunes in live every night, who can tell the difference that independent thinking makes. The best way to show our appreciation is to thank you and continue to allow our listeners the ability to download the archives of all the shows free of charge on iTunes, Podbean, and SoundCloud. No monthly fees, no cost to download individual shows, and none of the constant hassling for donations. That's the uprnradio.com difference. So stick around, there's much more to come with new shows on the way. For now, feel free to join your favorite show live in the Pal Talk chat room, easily accessible off uprntalkradio.com, and share the experience of listening live with other listeners from around the world. So thanks for listening, and thank you for being a part of the uprntalkradio.com family of listeners.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Do you love sports? Okay, maybe just at least pay attention to sports. Then check out the Big Shoulder Sports Show, Tuesday night, 7 to 9 Eastern on uprntalkradio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. JT, Justin, and I spill our guts about all things Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Bulls, and Bears with no filter, the way nature intended sports to be heard. We also cover the national news in the sports world, but really, that's just because we have to. The Big Shoulder Sports Show, live Tuesdays 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on UPRNTalkRadio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. Or check out the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and SoundCloud. 3 guys saying words, making radio happen every week.
Hello, everyone. Come join the discussion Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern on the new program Global Newsmaker Focus with co-hosts Vernell and Patrice. Our weekly interviews will feature newsmakers from a wide spectrum of fields of contemporary and global interest. Hope you'll be there.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Do you love sports? Okay, maybe just at least pay attention to sports. Then check out the Big Shoulder Sports Show, Tuesday night, 7 to 9 Eastern on UPRNTalkRadio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. JT, Justin, and I spill our guts about all things Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Bulls, and Bears with no filter, the way nature intended sports to be heard. We also cover the national news in the sports world, but really, that's just because we have to. The Big Shoulder Sports Show, live Tuesdays 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on UPRNTalkRadio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. Or check out the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and SoundCloud. 3 guys saying words, making radio happen every week.
Hello, everyone. Come join the discussion Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern on the new program Global Newsmaker Focus with co-hosts Vernell and Patrice. Our weekly interviews will feature newsmakers from a wide spectrum of fields of contemporary and global interest. Hope you'll be there.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Need a website? Go to Wix.com. Just add your photos.
September 19th special edition of Global Newsmaker Focus with co-hosts Vernell and Patrice. This is Patrice Sheridan speaking. Global Newsmaker Focus is broadcast on United Public Radio and UPRN 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana, and 107.9 FM and 105.3 FM, Henderson, Pass Christian, Mississippi. The program's website is globalnewsmakerfocus.com. Our guest author, retired Colonel Richard Hobbs, has graciously agreed to return for a discussion on the current Syrian and other Muslim refugee influx into Europe and the ramifications of this major development. 2 weeks ago, we had the honor of interviewing Colonel Hobbs on his latest book, Islam versus Civilization, the Great War of the 21st Century. Details on this most current book and all of the Colonel's excellent books can be found at the website coldoc.com, spelled COLDOC.com. Tonight on brief details for our guest, for our listeners. The guest author, retired Colonel Richard Hobbs, is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Selected as an original Olmsted Scholar, Hobbs received the degree of Docteur de l'Université in International Law and International Relations from the University of Lyon in France. Colonel Hobbs is also an Army Ranger and paratrooper. Colonel Hobbs spent 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, advising Vietnamese paratroopers and serving as executive to the deputy commander in Vietnam, managing a large fire base, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry, and advising a Vietnamese regiment. Hobbs was an Army Research Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. He has served in the Pentagon and with the Department of State as politico-military advisor in the Bureau of Near Eastern and South Asian Affairs. After retiring from the Army as a colonel after 27 years, he joined Teledyne, where his positions included Vice President International. He established his own consultant firm, Service International Limited, for international business development. Colonel Hobbs has taught courses in international politics and international conflict at the University of Nevada at Reno. Colonel Hobbs also has served as Assistant Professor of International Relations on the faculty of the Department of Social Sciences at West Point. Some of Colonel Hobbs' books include Radical Islam at War with the World. Do we want dimitude, third-class citizens, slaves under Islam, or do we want to be free is our choice? Next book, Death by 1,000 Cuts, Islam, Fiscal Irresponsibility, and Other Threats to Destroy America. Third book, World War IV and Beyond, Islamofascism, the Third Jihad, and Other Threats to the USA. Fourth book, You and the New World Order. Fifth book, The Myth of Victory, What is Victory in War? And the most recent one, powerful as well, very powerful, entitled Islam versus Civilization, The Great War of the 21st Century. Now, Colonel Richard Hobbs' website with his books, book details can be found at coldoc.com, again, COLDOC.com. And Colonel, before introducing co-host for now, I'd like to note a program shout-out to Phoenix and Mesa Group Nightfall with members John, Jared, Mike, and JT, and to media specialists Aaron, and also media specialists Will and Ben of Ben Childs and Associates. And enough of me. We're thrilled to have you here, but now I know you'll want to welcome our guest as well.
Welcome back, Colonel. It's a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you.
Well, you know, we just can't wait to this will be a shorter interview. We can't wait to get going with the questions. Sir, this massive influx of Muslim, this first topic, sir, is that this massive influx of Muslim refugees represents the hijra you were discussing in a most recent interview and in your book. And, sir, on this hijra, do I remember it correctly that it's the intent of the Islamic terrorists to conquer by migrating to these Western countries and by their growing numbers to infiltrate the populace and governments? Could you talk about this hijra, this migration strategy?
Well, the migration idea starts back in the very beginning of Islam when Muhammad was finally ostracized, basically, in Mecca, and he was about to be tried for treason, so he had been invited by the people in Yathrib, which is about 200 miles north of Mecca, to come and be their arbiter because they had a number of tribes of both Christians, Bedouins, and Jews. And so he found the better part of valor was to get out of Mecca while the getting was good, and he took off for Medina, and what became Medina. That was the town of Yathrib. And that is called the Hijra, or Hijara, however you want to pronounce it. I like Hijara just because it's easier to say in English. But it doesn't make any difference. It's so important that it's considered the beginning of the Islamic times, and all dates used in Islam start from that year, 622, which was the Hijra from Mecca to Yathrib, and they renamed the city of the Prophet, which became Medina.
Thank you. That's very informative for us, Colonel. Now, other field commentators are mentioning this aspect of Hijra as well this past week. There's an article at the WND website at WND.com. It's entitled, ISIS Smuggler, We Will Use Refugee Crisis to Infiltrate West, 4,000 covert terrorists already in place awaiting orders. Now, the article author, which was posted, this article was posted September 4th, by Leo Holman, is news editor for WND, and is very interesting confirmation of several of your views. First of all, he quotes author Robert Spencer, writing on September 4th in the Front Page magazine, quoting, "This is no longer just a refugee crisis. This is a hijra," end quote, or hijra. And Mr. Holman notes that, as you say, sir, hijra is the Islamic doctrine of migration, which is a form of stealth jihad.
Yes, it's very interesting because this whole idea, which does come out of the Quran for the business that it is good to emigrate. Quran, Surah 4, verse 100, say that it's a good thing to emigrate. And the point of emigration is to establish Islam in new areas. So, we realize, and we've talked about it so many times already, Patrice, that Islam is not tied to any state. It is considering itself as worldwide, and its objective is worldwide to establish Islam as the only religion, though it's not a religion, I call it an ideology, the only ideology in the whole world. So this is a very important part, and I think he's very appropriate when he calls it the stealth jihad, because this is we're not used to this sort of thing. We like to be things out in the open. This is very deceptive. It's very quiet. It's very behind the scenes. But it's dealing with very large numbers, as we're beginning to see in Europe. And we've already seen it. We just haven't paid attention to it. The Europeans have been asleep, and the Americans have been asleep. It's a very dangerous situation, Patrice.
It certainly does sound very, very dangerous. And, sir, there was another second topic that I found very interesting, and that is, and it also does follow from some of your comments in your excellent books here, that topic being the EU's unawareness of the danger of overwhelming the Muslims, the EU's unawareness of the danger of overwhelming the Muslims to Europe, because this danger involved the threat of embedded ISIS members. That fifth column danger, Colonel, you mentioned in your book and noted in your most recent interview, that Islamic fifth column.
Well, we have a basic problem here. The United States has been built on a concept of a melting pot. We had lots of people who came to this country, mostly from Western Europe. And they came over here, and when you took that boat ride, it wasn't like taking the subway across town. It was a very major decision, and you really didn't have the option of going back. And they had committed to moving to the new world and to a new life. And so when they got here, they decided they wanted to be Americans, and they figured that out. They couldn't speak the language yet, a lot of them, but their children did very quickly, and the next generation did. So that was the melting pot. What we have in this group is a group that does not assimilate. They come into a country, but they do not intend to be members of that society, because their definition of everything is that the Ummah, the Muslim nation, is the one society of the world. Nations have no boundaries. They are not interested in boundaries, and they only have interest in propagating their own view of the world. And when they do that, then you have a group that is within a society that has not decided to join that society. Now, Americans don't understand that, because with our history, the Italians, the Irish, the French, the Germans, the Danes, the Norwegians, everybody came over here. They eventually decided to say, hey, I'm an American. These people don't say I'm an American. They say I'm a Muslim. And therefore, we have a very serious problem. That's why I call it a fifth column, because these people do not wish to assimilate. Their objective is to change our system to match their system. That is totally unacceptable.
Absolutely, sir. And to change the government to be under Sharia law, and to throw away the existing form of, to discard the existing form of government that was rightfully in place. There are other points as well in this article, and that is your reference to the fact that the global Islamic Caliphate would just jettison the Western Judeo-Christian civilization and culture. Now, he has come under very strong criticism. Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister. This article also notes that Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, was lampooned in the European media Thursday for writing an op-ed in which he stated Hungary was blocking the Muslim migrants to preserve its Christian heritage, end quote. And, your book, Colonel, Islam versus Civilization, does detail this major threat that Islam presents to our Western heritage, our system of law, and also Christian and Judeo principles such a wonderful heritage of our particular civilization.
Well, it's very interesting, the whole question of European civilization, which was the earliest basis of the Judeo-Christian civilization, which we have honored over all these years, and it's fading. We've kind of given it up. The Europeans have faded. It's sad. I went back and looked at one of my earlier books, Death by a Thousand Cuts, and the part I have in there about demographics was very interesting, because the Europeans are facing an enormous problem. Europe is dying. That's just a flat statement. 19 of the 20 lowest birth rates in the world are in Europe, the only exception being Japan. And 5 of the lowest are old communist countries, Latvia, Bulgaria, Slovenia, Russia, and Ukraine. They are very low. What it is, Patrice, it takes 2.11 children per woman to maintain a population. And when you don't do that, you got a problem. And Europe has an enormous problem. I just looked at some of the numbers. 2.11 is to maintain a population. At 1.9, it said it's never been reversed. At 1.3, we say it's impossible to reverse. It takes 80 to 100 years to correct itself. Well, look at the numbers. France, 1.8. England, 1.6. Greece, 1.3. Germany, 1.3. Italy, 1.2. Spain, 1.1. All across 31 countries in the European Union, the average is 1.38. The Muslim average, 8.1. So we've got an enormous problem. So what does that lead to? It means they're losing 10, 20, 30 million people across Europe in the next 10, 20 years, which means there are not enough people to fill the jobs. And more critically, they don't have the people to pay the taxes to provide all the welfare and benefits for the old people. So Europe has an enormous problem demographically. So one of their first things that they're looking for is immigrants. And the problem with that is when you bring in Muslims, they don't assimilate. So you've got a dichotomy going where you've got the desire to bring in people to work and provide the tax base to provide for the elderly and the workforce to maintain the country, and yet you're bringing in people who are not really going to be in your best interest in the long term. That is the definition of a disaster.
Absolutely, and as you have noted in your books, Colonel, in France with those zones urbaines sensibles, those areas in which the Muslims have segregated, are residing in segregated communities that really pose a threat even to local law enforcement. They are beginning to increase their power, demanding Sharia law. In England, this also is happening in certain areas, and even in the United States, we seem to have undue Muslim influence in such areas as Dearborn, Michigan, parts of that.
Dearbornistan. Yes. Dearbornistan, we call it now.
Wow.
And Minneapolis is a big center for Somalis. So we have an enormous problem right here in the United States. And we don't like to face it. So this is a problem. You're right.
Well, too, as well, that comment on the population, the staggering figures that would suggest that indeed the European population legacy will be diminishing because of the lowering of the childbirth rates. Is news to me, and or at least it's refreshed in my mind. That was a wonderful point, Colonel, as well. Also, another topic question. You had mentioned the Schengen Agreement in your book, and with this huge influx, European common borders under the Schengen Agreement have had to be monitored with this huge wave. The changes now in the European prior status of implementing the Schengen Agreement now are major. And also there are changes in the EU Union unity, what there was, because of the various countries' response to this massive influx.
Well, yeah, the Schengen Agreement, as you mentioned, is that's open borders. And the open borders thing is a wonderful part of the European Union. It's sort of like copying the United States, where we have no borders between among all of our 50 states. But it's become a disaster for them in the last couple of weeks, because you've got these people. There are two main routes, Patrice, coming in. You've got the route coming across from Turkey to Greece or to Bulgaria and getting up through to try to get to Germany. Their objective is get to Germany or Sweden. And the other route is from Libya, the short distance across to Sicily and Italy, and then get up into Europe that way. With the Schengen Agreement, the moment you get into one of these countries, you're in free. Holy, holy, all in free. So you take a little boat ride, that lousy little inflatable boat from Turkey, about 20 miles to the island of Lesbos, which is a Greek island. And you just go that short distance, and now you are in Greece. When you are in Greece, by definition, you can now travel any place to these other countries, and that's what they're doing, and it's driving the Greeks and the Macedonians and the Bulgarians and Hungarians, driving them crazy, because these people don't want to be in Greece. Their objective is to move on because they want to get to Germany. Germany is the great mecca for them, where they want to get to, because of the great benefits, and Angela Merkel has been bringing in, she's saying they're going to take 800,000 this year. They've already gotten in 400,000. So, the numbers are just, enormous. And, you forget that the Europeans have been taking in about 900,000 people every year for several years. So this is, we have about 50 million. We don't even know what the number is, 52 million Muslims in Europe. There's some big number. We expect it to double in just a few years. It's going to double in 20 years. That's 100 million. They have a problem, Patrice.
They do indeed. And, I should note this article that also discusses the Schengen Agreement. You also have a wonderful section on it, or a discussion of it in your latest book. Now, this article is from the www.bustle.com website. It's by April Siese, S-I-E-S-E, or Siese, April Siese, or Siese, S-I-E-S-E. It's entitled, Will European Union Keep Its Open Border Policy? The influx of Syrian refugees has put it into question. But what's interesting is, it's a very detailed article, and quoting directly, let me see, the reason for previous checkpoints included major sporting events as well as the observance of the 60th anniversary of D-Day. The Schengen Agreement stipulates that there can only be a maximum of just 30 days for border checks, however, end quote. Well, I think it's gone beyond that at this point, or will shortly, and hopefully that agreement will remain in place.
Well, the Europeans, if you've seen some of the pictures on television, you've got hundreds, if not thousands of people charging up against the borders. Several of these states have already put up big fences. We have large fences in Bulgaria and a couple other places. And people either go over them or go under them. And then they've got a whole bunch of them that are marching along the highway. They're getting in the railroad stations. They're demanding buses and trains to get them on to Germany. And some of these countries then first tried to stop them and then finally said, "Oh, we give up," and they opened up and they all came through. There's thousands of these people made it. Well, right now it's probably hundreds of thousands when you add it all up. But if you'll notice, there are always some women and children up front. Forget the television. The television always focuses on the women and the children, and particularly that poor little 3-year-old boy who died. I've seen too many pictures of that. I think it was totally staged, and they failed to report that the family had been living in an apartment in Turkey for 3 years without any rent. So these so-called migrants are a little bit on the suspicious side. But anyway, you've got these people coming through, and they're pushing, and these countries what are they going to do? I mean, each one of these people represents an expense. Somebody has to take care of them. They have to be fed. They're going to be moved. They're going to be housed, and then some of them are sick. These are expenses for these countries, even if they're just trying to pass through. They finally, a lot of them said, okay, the heck with it. Let them in, keep going, move them toward Germany. And oh, poor old Germany. I don't know how Germany's going to handle all this, but that's the way it is, and you've got some enormous numbers here, Patrice.
Indeed. Well, on the numbers regarding even the United States, an interesting article, the New York Times, and that was by journalists Gardner Harris, David E. Sanger, and David M. Herzenhorn, posted September 10th, entitled "Obama Increases Number of Syrian Refugees for U.S. Resettlement to 10,000." And just quoting directly, President Obama, under increasing pressure to demonstrate that the United States is joining European nations in the effort to resettle Syrian refugees, has told his administration to take in at least 10,000 displaced Syrians over the next year, end quote. A second article, though, that gives it an added focus, very informative, is at Breitbart, BREITBART.com. It was posted September 14th, and the Breitbart.com website's article is entitled "Federal Data: U.S. Annually Admits 250,000 Muslim Migrants." Again, U.S. annually admits 250,000 Muslim migrants, and the journalist is Julia Hahn. And let me see. Very powerful material here. One paragraph, as an example, quoting directly, let's see, the Middle East represents the fastest growing bloc of immigrants admitted into the country on visas, according to a census database report authored by the Center for Immigration Studies. And it gives a direct link there at that Breitbart site. And, that too could cause perhaps too large of a segment with our multi-ethnic population here.
Well, yes, and we've allowed a couple 100,000 people in, and that's and then we have a brilliant congressman, Senator Dick Durbin. I feel sorry for him. His brain is hurting someplace. He wants 100,000 from Syria. I mean, this man has lost his mind, but they don't understand that these people do not assimilate. I don't know how many people we have to get killed. I mean, we kill them at Fort Hood. We shoot up the Army recruiting stations. We kill people at one place or another in this country, and we think, all these people are nice people. Well, that's nice. The point is they should stay in the Middle East, where it's their culture, it's their language, it's their climate, and they are more acclimated to that area. And that's where they should stay. It's much cheaper to build camps in the Middle East than it is to bring them to the United States and put them on welfare, or to bring them to Europe and put them on welfare. And that is the sad part of it. And you also notice, and you will get to it, I'm sure, is that the Arab countries are not taking any of these Syrian so-called refugees.
Absolutely. Now, indeed, there's an article at the Washington Post. It was posted September 4th. It's entitled, "The Arab World's Wealthiest Nations Are Doing Next to Nothing for Syria's Refugees." The journalist is Isfahan Thawar. And quoting directly from this article, as Amnesty International recently pointed out, the 6 Gulf countries, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, and Bahrain have offered 0 resettlement places to Syrian refugees, citing directly Amnesty International. And this claim was echoed by Kenneth Roth, executive director of Human Rights Watch on Twitter, end quote. And, this article also has a very interesting point as well. The region, let me just quote directly. The region has the capacity to quickly build housing for the refugees. The giant construction companies that have built the gleaming towers of Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Riyadh should be contracted to create shelters for the influx. Saudi Arabia has plenty of expertise at managing large numbers of arrivals. It receives an annual surge of millions of Hajj pilgrims to Mecca. There's no reason all this know-how can't be put to humanitarian use, end quote. Indeed, very, very much the case. What do you think, dear Colonel?
Well, that's the whole point. They have the money, they have the space, they can do it. And particularly the Saudis, they're used to handling a couple of million people for the Hajj, which is going on now. So they know how to do that. And it's very interesting. There is a camp I think it's called Kilis. I think it must be in Turkey. And the cost for that is so much cheaper. And the people that are living there, and these are sort of like trailers, there are 14,000 of them in this camp. And the people who are living there are very happy. They are living much better. Some of them say, hey, this is better than we were before. They have grocery stores. They have laundries. They have everything. They have electricity. The women can walk out at night because they said there are lots of lights. The woman said, I can walk out at 2 or 3 in the morning and feel safe. That's better than most places in the Muslim world with the women, because the life of a woman is not exactly pleasant in some places.
Indeed. Well, too, on the lack of proper direction of funds now by the Arab countries to this, the problems there with the Syrian refugees. We had mentioned before the Saudi, the Wahhabi, intend to build mosques throughout America. And I guess there are tremendous mosque building projects already in France and elsewhere in Europe. On that topic, the Saudis offering to build 200 mosques in Germany as a strategy to promote their Wahhabi branch of Islam. Interesting article there, sir. It was posted September 18th at the International Business Times site, or ibtimes.com, and it's entitled, posted September 18th, Amid Muslim Refugee Crisis, Saudi Arabia vows to build 200 mosques in Germany, and the journalist is Elizabeth Whitman.
Yeah, that's just what we need. 200 more mosques. The mosque is the center of all jihadi operations. And these are the worst ones because, as you pointed out, they're Wahhabi, and Wahhabis are the most extreme of the whole crew. These are our great friends, the Saudis, who made a contract with the devil years and years ago when they agreed that the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia could control all the religious side as long as they kept it out of Saudi Arabia, and they took care of foreign policy on their side. This is a disaster. It's the dumbest thing in the world is to allow any more mosques. Actually, all mosques should be closed. I mean, I'm a very dangerous person, obviously, but every mosque in the Western world should be investigated, and when it is seditious, it should be closed. 80%, 82% of the mosques in the United States are seditious, and they should be closed. It's probably worse in Europe. So 200 more mosques is not what we need.
Indeed, and Germany right now is suffering with this huge influx. I believe, too, France might have had an incident as well. There are two sources here I'd like to mention. The first is at the pamgeller.com site, and I actually have two different pages open here. And then I'd like to mention the topic about why the Syrians are in this huge influx and how the Christians are still remaining, are horribly suffering under the Christian genocide occurring in the Middle East. Now, back to the violence of the camps by Muslims upon Muslims, also by Muslims against some of the German residents. First article at the PamGeller.com site, and it's entitled, Shocking Document, Muslim Migrants Raping Women and Children in Camps in Germany. It was posted September 14th, 2015. And I have another article website, and that is from the Gatestone Institute International Policy Council website, and it's at the gatestoneinstitute.org website, spelled Gatestone, gatestoneinstitute.org website. And the article is entitled, Germany, Migrants Rape Epidemic. It was posted by journalist Søren Kern on September 18th. And let me see, major points here in this article, very, very upsetting. Now, to quote one paragraph directly, a growing number of women and young girls housed in refugee shelters in Germany are being raped, sexually assaulted, and even forced into prostitution by male asylum seekers, according to German social work organizations with first-hand knowledge of the situation, end quote. And it's a really very, very bad situation. Now, Pam Geller at her website shows a copy of this letter that I'm about to describe per this Gatestone Institute article, further citing the Gatestone Institute article. On August 18th, a coalition of 4 social work organizations and women's rights groups sent a 2-page letter to the leaders of the political parties in the regional parliament in Hesse, a state in west-central Germany, warning them of the worsening situation for women and children in the refugee shelters, end quote. And it's extremely dangerous for these women. There, to just quote the letter, one sentence of it, 2 sentences. The practice of providing accommodations in large tents, the lack of gender-separate sanitary facilities, premises that cannot be locked, the lack of safe havens for women and girls, to name just a few spatial factors, increases the vulnerability of women and children within the HEAE. This situation plays into the hands of those men who assign women a subordinate role and treat women traveling alone as wild game, end quote. What a hideous situation. And indeed, that total lack of responsibility or sexual self-restraint does have its echoes in the Quran, Hadith, and Sirah. These young men aren't taught the notion that of human dignity that must be afforded women as fellow human beings.
Well, I've written several times about the role of women under the ideology of Muhammad, and it's appalling. Women are chattel, and this is an example. What you're quoting there is this attitude toward women. I think he called it a unaccompanied female is called fair game. The nastier term is they're called fair meat. But anyway, these women are what's all women. It's amazing. I don't understand how the feminist group in America isn't totally up in arms over the treatment of women under Islam. The treatment is just terrible, from female genital mutilation to this total business of, if you look at Norway or Sweden, I think it's in Sweden, all of the rapes in each of the last 2 years have been by foreigners, which is by definition has been Muslim immigrants. And, that's a very nice open society, and that's no way to treat women, because Swedish women are great to start with. So that's ridiculous. But this attitude, when they get into these countries, then when they get into Europe, their treatment of the European women is atrocious. And what you were just talking about is the treatment of their own women is atrocious. that's it. I call this the frustration of the Muslim male. As soon as they reach puberty, they're segregated. He never learns how to deal with a female. I mean, as a kid, we had spin the bottle, and we did different things, and had to hold hands maybe, and, maybe even a kiss, but I don't think that was very often. But anyway, you learn to deal with females from the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, and you dealt with females constantly in your life. They do not. They're segregated immediately. And so they never learn how to deal with a female. And that leaves them with an attitude, which I just do not understand. I mean, how they've come from a woman as their mother, and yet they can treat all females as if they are objects.
Indeed, sir. And, furthermore, in this article at the Gatestone Gatestone Institute International Policy Council website, posted on September 18th, there's a lengthy list of crimes that have been committed against German women by some of these refugees. They are truly horrific. And apparently, even the school personnel are advising the parents of the local children that they really can't even wear certain outfits. Children of an age certainly should be able to wear shorts or a normal dress or skirt. And with these people around, they're afraid that the children will be assaulted. And this totally displaces their normal way of living.
Well, yeah, it's crazy, Patrice, because we grew up with girls, and girls were friends, buddies, and everything else, and we didn't have any trouble like that. It was very rare to have anything that was obnoxious between a boy and a girl, because they grew up together. These people don't grow up together. In fact, they don't even get married that way. Most of the marriages are fixed by the family so that the bride is selected for them. So what you have, and this is one of the most critical things, there is no love in Islam. Love is an interesting subject, but there is no love. They do not tolerate it. There is no love in Islam. And that is, I think, a terrible indictment of Islam.
Yes, it makes its ideology, another reason for its ideology being dysfunctional. And, the next topic one is a very important one. And what I mentioned, I think, is the wonderful work that Sister Hatuna is doing at the Hatuna Foundation, HATUNE foundation.com. I think the article V might be in front of it, HatunaFoundation.com. I believe she was a refugee, she and her families. Now she's a sister doing all this wonderful work. Well, the topic question is this: why the Syrian Christians, for the most part, are not in this huge influx of migrants. And there's a great article, and a WND exclusive at WND.com. And the article is entitled, Refugee Crisis Hits Prime Time, but Christians Left Out in Cold. Believers in Syria, Pakistan, Iraq ignored by Europe, U.S. It was posted on December 10th. And let's see, just quoting directly, about 350,000 Syrian Christians have been forced to flee their homes. Many have been killed, sold into sex slavery, or forced into hiding. They are not going to UN refugee camps, where they often face further persecution, sources tell WND, end quote. And also another paragraph that I think is very telling: as U.S. and European leaders reach out with open arms to tens of thousands of Muslim refugees flooding into Europe, the groans of persecuted Christians in Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan are increasingly drowned out, end quote.
Sad, isn't it?
It really is.
It's just ridiculous. You'd think the Christian community in the United States would be up in arms and screaming, and that the Pope would have a fit, but they're silent. The Christians are being driven out of the land of the basis of Christianity, which is the area of Macedonia, or Mesopotamia and the Syrian area, and over to Jerusalem. That is the cradle of Christianity. They are being driven out of that area totally. There are very few left, and the ones that are there, as you described, are being persecuted and being driven out. Daesh is after all the Christians that they can find, if there are any left. We still have the process of trying to make them dhimmi, which is dhimmitude, which Bat-Yor created, and we have that. We have pacts like the Pact of Umar of centuries ago, where you have the dhimmitude, where you pay the tax, the jizya. That is in effect in parts of Daesh land now, which is called the Islamic State, which people don't like to call the state, but it's more of a state than some places, certainly some others. What's interesting and what's extremely sad is that of the people we're allowing into our country, about 95% are Muslim. We're only allowing 4% or less that are Christians. The Christians we could assimilate.
Yes.
Would probably assimilate in this country and not be a problem. The Muslims will not assimilate. So, I mean, the idiocy of all this is enough to drive one up the wall.
Absolutely. In this article as well, Lord George Carey, quoting here directly, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, in a recent op-ed in the Telegraph, urged Britain to focus on taking Syrian Christians, saying that they are the most vulnerable and repeatedly targeted victims of the Syrian civil war, end quote. He also mentions in the article that they already have the church foundation to assimilate
yes, that's right.
Christians. Yes, and we have them here. I forget the name of that wonderful Chicago attorney who's helping the Christians from Syria and elsewhere to immigrate into the United States. They have existing church communities and school communities. They're all set to really become full-fledged citizens. And it's a shame. They should be right at the forefront of any of these immigrant lists coming in.
Well, I think the only people that we should allow in the United States from the Middle East are Christians.
I agree too, sir. The others pose such
it's just a dangerous thing. I don't know where you want to end because you're getting close to your time.
We are indeed. But, I think our topic questions, the questions that I wanted to ask, and you so beautifully have asked them, have been very well answered by you. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have one more question or what?
No, I don't, sir. Your comments.
Well,
like to add. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we get into is, what are we doing in the Middle East? And I call it now the Afro-Asian Civil War. And is it religion or is it power politics? And is there a U.S. role? The problem is there are 5 at least failed states. Iraq is gone, Syria is gone, Yemen is gone, Libya is gone. Lebanon is not doing well, and we don't even have to mention Somalia, which hasn't been anything for 25 years. We have 5 centers of power. We have Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. We have 2 former empires, Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, Iran, the Persian Empire. They did rule all of these areas at one time, and they think that they're still their areas. And then we have a whole bunch of non-governmental organizations that are in there, which includes everything from Al-Qaeda, which is in various places in all of these countries, Al-Nusra Front, the Free Syrian Army, Daesh, the Islamic State, and a bunch of others, the Houthis in Yemen. So, and with this extremely multifaceted civil war, anyone who thinks they know how how to deal with it is a dreamer. This is the most complex civil war, I think, in history, and it is an enormous civil war, and it is an epical war to establish a new regional order. Boundaries are gone. The Sykes-Picot line between Syria and Iraq is gone. There will be new boundaries. There will be lots of death, genocide, and people moved. And there's almost nothing we can do about it. Anything we do probably causes more trouble than we started with, because each side that you pick to support irritates one or the other out of these 10 to 15 to 20 different sides in this conflict. So this is really the toughest thing anyone has ever faced, and I think we're going to have to stand back and watch. This is going to be a spectator sport, and it's not going to be a fun game.
Very powerful comments there, Colonel Hobbs, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, Vernell, I know you want to say something.
Well, I wanted to ask one thing. Colonel Hobbs, there was a comment made at one of, it's been in the news, Trump had a open house for people to ask questions, and this one guy stood up and said that, President Obama was a Muslim, and that the real problem we had here in America was Muslim.
Yes. That was a good question. That was a tough question. And Trump has been catching hell for it ever since.
Right.
But there are two things about it. One, a bunch of the mass media people got up and said, this is absolutely false. You can't do this. Well, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about, as is often the case. The point is that, and Trump, he didn't try to answer it. He avoided it, which was intelligent. But the truth of it is Muslims around the world consider Obama to be a Muslim because of the very fundamental fact that he claims that his father was a Muslim. If your father is a Muslim, you are a Muslim. Doesn't make any difference what you say. You are a Muslim forever. So that is a real big problem. And the whole question of whether or not where he was born and all this stuff, well, Obama has never provided any good evidence of anything. So the question was a setup that really stuck it to poor old Mr. Trump. But the mass media should not have jumped on it saying that, he screwed it all up and he's wrong in doing all that. It's a very tough question, but the Muslims consider Obama a Muslim. Whether he is or not, I have no idea.
I was just wondering what your take would be on it. Great answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Colonel, we so appreciate you joining us this evening. And for our listeners, you can get the details on the Colonel's books at COLDOC.com. They're excellent works. And, of course, Colonel Hobbs' latest book is entitled Islam versus Civilization, The Great War of the 21st Century. Always a pleasure, sir, to hear from you. Always very informative. Thank you again for joining us, and I want to thank our listeners, my co-host Vernell, and wish everyone a great Sunday and week.
Well, Patrice and Vernell, thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you, Colonel Hobbs.
Night,
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for some fat.